So, I don't know if you remembered all the different divisions of the outline, but this is under the main topic of what is the definition or the defining attribute of correct cognition, and then there were three points about it. First one, we finished the first one. The second one and the third one is to dispel the objection that the definition is too broad and includes different forms of awareness that aren't truly forms of valid cognition, but meet what has been described as the defining attribute of correct cognition, and therefore implying that the definition or the defining attribute is not precise enough, it's too broad. So that's the subject.
That is that is Milua Yuri Cherishena, Lokunduba, Jampa Jeshitini churches, Temani to Meduti, Rande Ziki, Temangame, Sunshi, Togusibe, Java Manyaba, Tini, Laya, Tendesing, Tati, Temangamati, Tosin, the Temangamati, Java Manyaba Pala. And the Jeshiti, the sugar chigi, and the Jeshiti, Yuri Jubare, Prana Ramantin Juba Martapina, Samanganga, the Shabati Yamba in it, Jeshi get to Mary. The Jeshiti, the Nama with the Samati top and the Shabati Mania Besa, Nama to wear. Jada Javan Mayam de Palati, Nike Samati sugar did Lion could jubilee mission. Koran around the key, you do Jubeta, Nibayama is just only the Tamamari.
So, this point is addressing the form of awareness, cognitive awareness, category of cognitive awareness that is not in this school recognized as valid cognition. And the Tibetan term for that is jeshe. Jeva means it means to cut in the sense of to distinguish. So it's a kind of distinguishing awareness or discriminating awareness. I don't know the original Sanskrit term for it. Some have been proposed by other translators. I'm not sure that it's correct or not. And so the Tibetan word is jeshe. Jeshe is generally a form of awareness which is subsequent to the original or the initial or the newly generated correct cognition, which is in this school the necessary quality for being identified as valid cognition. So then, in the way this topic is introduced, it's saying, well, that so-called subsequent cognition, which is correctly apprehending its object, is it therefore not a form of non-deceptive awareness? and therefore is not also incorrectly to be identified as a form of correct cognition. So that's the form of the objection. And so it's described here in the root text as lo kunzoba, I think is the word it says. Or just kunzoba, it says. Kunzob is usually the word that's used to translate conventional truth. Can say also a conventional awareness. So here the commentary describes that conventional awareness as the form of subsequent cognition that is memory. It's a form of Jampa. So Jampa Jieshe is what is, the commentary says, is the meaning of the conventional awareness here. And it says, then Dharmakirti is saying, that is not held. Minder means we do not accept, we do not hold that is a form of valid cognition. And then the reason comes right before it. It says, because that subsequent cognition is the apprehension, the awareness of something that was already grasped previously by the genuine form of valid cognition that occurred initially. Okay, so then the way this recognition or subsequent cognition is described is it's saying that when the initial valid cognition occurs, then the strength of that valid cognition, if it remains for certain period of time, if the force of that valid cognition is not diminished, manyamba means if it's not weakened, then it has the ability to initiate these forms of subsequent awareness that are holding the import that the valid cognition originally determined, but they're not doing it on their own. So the valid cognition sort of did the hard job of determining the correct understanding, and this one is sort of riding on the tail coat of that. That's using loose language, but that's the way it's understood. If for instance, if the strength of that original correct cognition, if enough time goes by, or if it loses its vitality, then that subsequent cognition does not have its own means to apprehend that object. And so that's the basis for denying that it represents a form of valid cognition. It is apprehending something that something else, the valid cognition, already determined to be correct. And so we don't, therefore, it's not itself a form of valid cognition. So they might ask, well, why is this subsequent condition described here or identified using the term conventional mind? Gunzoba. So gunzoba is also the term that is sometimes translated as relative truth when you're talking about the two truths, relative truth and ultimate truth. And so there are various ways of interpreting the literal meaning of that term that we're calling conventional or relative. And Kunzoba is one of the interpretations of it is that it based on the root that it obscures something from the root, which means to veil something or to cover something up, cover up the way things truly are. And so in that sense, sometimes the word Kunzoba is interpreted to mean a mistaken mind or a false mind, in the sense that the way the object appears to it is not in keeping with its true nature. So in other schools, it's used to, in relation to ultimate truth. But here, we don't need to think of it in that sense, but rather the fact that we still can use the term in the sense of being false, in that unlike, say, the direct perception, the way in which the object is appearing to the mind that perceives it corresponds to it, and that represents the quality of the valid cognition. But this subsequent cognition is also a conceptual mind. This recollection is a conceptual mind, and conceptual minds, by their very nature, are somewhat false, in that you're using the thing that appears to the mind is not the object, but it's an image of the object. And so, in that sense, what is appearing to the mind of a concept does not match the nature of reality. So if we want to have a more precise description of what that word subsequent cognition, how to understand literally what it means in Tibetan. So it is it says cut, but cut in the sense of determining. So it's a kind of determining mind. So why is it called that, a kind of determining mind? It's a determining mind. The determining part of the term is a reference to the correct cognition that preceded it. And so sometimes they use the word drondok. Drondok means something that is falsely attributed to the object, some sort of misunderstanding about the object, something that's falsely attributed to the object. Then what correct cognition does is it cuts that, in the sense that it eliminates that misunderstanding and determines its true nature. So the determining aspect of the word subsequent cognition is a reference back to that correct cognition. And then it's an awareness, it's a determining awareness, in the sense that it then re-engages, once again engages, Layan Jupa means it engages once again the object that was determined to be valid by the former correct cognition. So that's literally what the term Jeshe means.
chama ni indi chama chube to ma chube de bu ji gi ne zu ju sheba inde da chama se de sheba ji ko bres mo su ji tawang du su gi yu ji yu to ba yu sheba di yu to la ro ji ge ba
no
mo bu tawang
oh drop ji
la so di ro ji ge ba da
no
man du mi shi gi 아니 이것도 수세로 통해서 조치기도가 당제지야를 봐. 이네 앞으로 온부들이 시부들이 수들이 dimba 말봐. 이게 dimba 말봐. 온부들 때니 유지 온부세 마세기 유세 마세지 물어봐. 이네야 미국 온부들이 수기 진식이야 말이지. 그래서
So this is now within the definition. Now this is the main subject is what is the essential nature of the definition of correct cognition. So this has three parts to it. We finished the first one, which is to giving a definition, the correct understanding of what the essential defining attribute of correct cognition is. Now we're going to the second section of this topic, which is identifying what is the object that this definition applies to. So it's the tenshi. Tenshi would be then the thing being defined. What is the category of things that are defined by this defining attribute? The attribute is applied to something. So what is that class of things that it applies to? That's here in Senshi. So then this sort of example, counterexample that doesn't seem to apply is identified in order to say, no, it doesn't apply to that. Because what the root text says is that lo nitsemani. It says that the quality of being then now we can't say correct cognition because that implies mental. We have to say the quality of being correct measurement or correct apprehension of the object applies only to the mind. So loni kuchamani. So this is set up in the commentary by saying, well, isn't it true in the case of sensory perception, for instance, sensory perception? All forms of consciousness have two factors for them to occur. The outer factor is the object. The inner factor is the faculty. And when we're talking about the five forms of sense perception, the five sense faculties, eye, ear, nose, tongue, and body, they're physical in nature, right? So then, is it not the case that they play an integral role in the occurrence of correct cognition? So should that unerringness, that is the real essence of correct cognition, shouldn't that also apply to the faculty as well? Do you not have to have an unflawed or an unimpaired faculty in order to be able to develop, for instance, correct eye cognition or perception of blue? So then, for example, when you look at letters, if the letters are unclear, you take a magnifying glass or something. The magnifying glass serves as an aid that enables you to see letters more clearly, or can give you a bad vision. Your eyeglasses do the same job. So are they not an essential part of perceiving the thing? And it says, and here it uses that phrase, dön toba. So it's saying that this phrase came up before. Dön toba means then the ability to obtain some desired object. And obtaining the desired object is also how to understand the idea of being non-deceptive. My understanding is that obtaining the desired object carries over to the idea of achieving what your aims are. So then, is not the faculty, does that quality not apply to it? It helps to obtain the correct awareness of the sense object. So he says, so therefore, is it not also pramana? And that's the question. So, and then to reject that idea it says, he's referring to the root text. So when the root text says, the quality of being pramana pertains to mind. So that's, the answer to that is saying no, faculties, despite their role, the fact that they contribute to correct awareness, that does not endow them with the quality of being an essential form of correct cognition. So it says, then to describe the word mind here, it says the mind is that thing which is newly undeceptive in the sense that its object appears to it. So the thing that when you say something the object appears, that you're using a phrase which only applies to something mental. So the faculty is something that is involved in the process of having the object appear clearly, but appearing clearly can only be associated with something mental. So something that is newly non-deceptive, again, means newly non-deceptive in the sense of how that object is appearing to the mind in a newly non-deceptive way, and that can only be mental. So that's this main this point saying that the definition of correct cognition does not apply to non-mental things.
That ongo sawajite yutoba yaris ure. Tam bichilin gachi na muchina bichilin pitpani teleteni sutwan yarba. Di tola shabu di yariti kugi bichilin kura yati sugi number akibi yamu. Shebati sugi number akibi yarba.
So another really, I think, good example is if you take in the darkness, if you take a flashlight and you turn on the flashlight and shine it in the darkness, then the light from the flashlight certainly has a significant role in enabling you to obtain an awareness of objects that would not otherwise be visible to you in the dark. So in that sense, the flashlight corresponds to an analogy for the faculty. However, the appearance of the object is something that is associated with the mind. The object doesn't appear to the flashlight. The flashlight helps the object to appear to your mind. And so mind is the principal element when we're talking about correct cognition.
Yeah, just that is it. Rayu number seven, that is it. That is Rayu number seven, start to lower me the Lotini summaries in Carson, Seme Chubata, Seme Machube, which you do that in a Seme Chube de Bukarisha, Seme Machube de Bukarisha, that Seme Chube deputy. Any Lanjata, Torje, Mobu, Tolena, Kibu Juba, Situta, Tambu Lanjata, Torjet Haku. In a Lanjati Yamsaleata, Torjet Pato Yavi, Chigin Gurba, the Yusita, the Partula. YouTube Samatigi Chubri.
No, sir.
That deeper Landogi Landori Yuti, Tambulange, Torchum Musum.
No, sir.
In a Yamel Jutuba. The part of the cheat. Shayat, Samatan, Queen, Palati Church.
Samacho said, Lancha di Nor ne lancha maimba la lancha ki simna seme machova sigura.
Mari.
No.
That
Nos.
then that and this year did Carresna. 처음에 맞추게 되부터 가르쳐서는 처음에 맞추게 되부터 되셔. 아니 나 가르쳐 그래. 처음에 쳐봐도 맞추게 되부터 지금 또 이제 쳐서도가 라이브 넘버셔 권에서 동일에 로디 로디제. 이 처음에 맞추게 되부터 가르쳐서는 되도 유튜브에 참아디 샤고. 라이브 넘버셔에 아니 로디요나. 세시리 바라바라 유 넘버셔 로디를 아니 참아시기로 봐.
돈 주스
랑 돈 주스는 그 라이브 그래서 그래서 우리 처음에 맞춰봤어요. 라이브 넘버셔 로디 참아봐. 라이브 넘버셔 로디나 유튜브에 참아 아마체 중에 있어요. 유튜브에 참아디 채널 맞추게 되거든요. 라이브
맞췄으니 말 맞췄으니
그래. 그냥 라이브 넘버셔 로디 제. 이게나 라이브에 참아 발 맞춰가지고 무시기도 봐. 라이브 처음에 맞추게 되거든요. 라이브에 참아디샤. 되거든요. 그 가르쳐 주고 가르쳐서는 출 맞추 뜻을 가르쳐서는 라이브 넘버셔 로디샤. 라이브 넘버셔 로디유나 아니 라이브에 참아디 용부도 갔을 라이브에 참아디 군이 발치고야 말봐. 뭐지 발치봐. 도차를 붙여봐. 신이다 천자를 붙여봐. 신이다 천자님 받고 말봐. 샤만이 때.
넘버셔에 거네.
당부들의 처음에 쳐봐도 맞추게 되고 주지고 주어인 배치했지. 처음에 쳐게 되고 주지인데 남자도 돌제무를 뭐 이유 돈에다 기부 주게 주의 주어인 배치했지. 다디 유 남자 돌제무보다 돈은 주바디 돈에 지야디 처음에 쳐게 되고 시작. 다 처음에 맞추게 되고 주지인데 대유나시도 라이브 넘버셔를 로디유나시도 유튜브에 참아 방마치도 중요시도 유튜브에 참아디 처음에 맞추게 되고 되셔. 처음에 출 맞추 뜻을 가르쳐 라이브 넘버셔를 로디시로 디유나 유튜브에 참아 방마치도 중요시도 라이브에 참아디 라이브 넘버셔를 로디 처음에 맞추게 되고 천주구 소리 지르봐. 라이브 넘버셔 로디 신이로 치제. 이게 라이브에 제마디 천재로 치제. 들어봐 천재로 치제. 들어봐. 어디 있었다? 라이브 넘버셔 로디 얘는 아니 라이브에 제마 방마치도 중요시디 전에만 라이브에 제마디 처음에 맞추게 되고 하셔. 다 처음에 주게 되고디 난다 또 저기 디니시니 이 돈에는 주바디 다기 봐도 라이토베 참마디에 야르바 라이토베 참마디게 디니 라이토베 참마디 나도 그네 시바르지 지제수난도 네 시바를 때문에 돌렌치고 봐. 방제 시에니 아니 방제 파도. 남제 시에니 남제 양수는 봐. 어디 봐도 가진 로도 봐. 어디 있었대 전에 출에 보시.
다들 야구는 세우라는 거. 세우라는 디 넘버샤에 거네 아니 가서 셈에 가서
라인 넘버샤에 거네서 루아메베 로니 취지 상황이 되는 제가
그다음에
Rayu number share, when the Satu maybe Shiva said, this Satu Miru Shiva Tervata.
Let it.
This Senating River.
Let it.
Yena, that's any Rayu of the Tamati River.
Oh,
This 20 timber.
that's all.
10 to Nigel Pilot, Chip Gangi, Che Amarva. Just at 20 tiller, Rayu of the Tamatilla, Sena much better goose. There was this at the Rayu number share, lower with the Shiva Tisha.
This is kind of subtle. It follows from this assertion, which is saying, rejecting the idea that the faculties have the essential attribute that applies to correct cognitions. So that is being rejected by saying that the element that is central to the nature of correct cognition is the fact that the object is appearing to the mind newly and in a non-deceptive way. So that mental aspect of how the process of cognition occurs is being asserted here, and then that element is being carried through with the next statement, which is which introduces the notion that the principal function of correct cognition is to enable the person who develops it to apply himself or herself to adopting those activities and practices that promote one's spiritual development and abandoning those practices and activities that are antithetical to a spiritual development. So langcha, and langcha means thing to be adopted. Dorcha means thing to be abandoned or rejected. And so these are two central kind of a dichotomy that applies to the central activity of spiritual, a spiritual pursuit. So pramana is to be the central element in pramana is the mind, because when the mind develops that quality of having the unerring nature of the object appear to it, that's the thing which allows you to use the awareness that you gain by that act to apply it properly in the context of identifying what is the thing that you properly should pursue or adopt, and similarly identify those things that you should properly avoid and reject. So then there's a phrase here that kind of still is a little bit troubling to me, and I'm not absolutely certain about it. It says that the mind. This is a phrase. This is a line that says "Tseme cherbatan ma cherbe drebu." So drebu means result. The result of the pramana, meaning in this case meaning correct cognition, then it says being able to be, and then cher and mature here is I was confused about it. Which explained it to saying that it means uninterrupted, in the sense that the ability of the real nature of the object to appear to the mind is what qualifies it as being a pramana in the true sense of what a pramana is for. And therefore, once that engaging clearly and unerringly of the object by the mind, that's the principal quality that enables you to apply yourself to those things which need to be adopted and avoid those things that need to be avoided. And so if that cognitive event occurs in the way that you gain that clarity of perception in not only sense perception but in the sense of cognition or awareness, when that occurs, that's what gives you the resource that enables you to be able to apply yourself. And so that's why we associate pramana with the mind. That's the best I can do is what I'm saying. But I think that's kind of the gist of it.
Now that is teme machube debu se di debu tini ba mari. Tini de la teme machube debu ji juice tabari. Sanja de la teme machube debu tabari.
Jangja tisuran ding out tingyo.
Sadu milbe ribat sadu milbe shebati dirba
Chama.
teme tini ba.
Ore.
아니 참아디 사도 밀을 천재들봐 천재디
ore.
천재도 사 참아디야 사도 밀을 시버디 아니 칭이들봐
ore.
다디 그래서는 칭이들아 칭이디 천재디 조지를 지르봐
Jokje. That's all.
천재디
Ore.
그래 칭이디 참아 조지디 가르샤고 그래서는 사도 밀을 해버티 샤고
That's all.
디 인사디 천재들 참아 맞추베 되부샤 칭이들 참아 맞추베 되부지 주디샤
Sinikor.
칭이코라 그분이 이제 말봐
Ore.
천주를 봐
That's all.
천주 인사니 사도 밀을 시바당 참아니 발을 최신이 맞추버 봐 본인이 참아니 신 맞추버 참아 맞출 수도 본인이 뭐지를 봐
That's
똑같아들이 질 칭이시고 질 손절 봐
all.
어디서 참아 맞추베 대부세야 그래서는 천재프라샤 참아프라샤 참아 맞추베 대부지 주세야디 칭이디샤 다디 칭이 데이터 천전이 부디 그래 말봐 다디 유다부지 조제를 지르봐
That's all. Jokje.
아니 사도문을 그때 참아 조제를 지르봐 다디를 조제들 기민다 디 잡을 참아 제부다 참아 맞추
So this is very technical, not technical, but sort of, what should I say? Not ordinary statement. So it's language that's used to talk about the relationship between the tenyi, which is the defining attribute, and the tsenja, which is the thing that's being defined. So the thing that's being defined is the correct cognition itself. The correct cognition itself is mind. The defining attribute of that type of mind that we call correct cognition is that knowledge or that awareness which unerringly perceives its object for the first time. So then here it was saying that quality of perceiving the thing unerringly for the first time, then we added this idea that perceiving it unerringly for the first time means it's talking about the way in which it appears to the mind, how that object is becoming evident in the mind's field of awareness. So it's that sort of defining attribute is determining or is integral to understanding what it means to call something a correct cognition. So then it says So the best that I can do to try to clarify this language is to say, it says that this defining attribute and the thing that's being defined, they're not separate things. They're not like Legos that you take apart. The defining attribute is part of the essence of the correct cognition itself. Nevertheless, when we use the language to identify the defining attribute, that is the way that we establish what it means to be a correct cognition, which we think of as the entity being defined, that meaning the mind itself, that particular kind of mind. So then, so there's this idea of, the defining attribute is not really a cause in the sense that it makes the that it causes the correct cognition to come into being, per se, not that kind of causality, but they're using the word cause in a more figurative sense, or in a looser sense. It's just saying that it is the basis, maybe, instead of cause, for identifying what it is to be that correct cognition, and in that sense, the thing being defined is the result of or what is understood by that defining phrase, or that defining quality. So there's a relationship between the two, and then this language gets kind of hard for me to try to precisely kind of put into words in English that I'm sorry, it's the best I can do.
Langja tobe temati ta di meeting sur ci
di jamsu langja
langja di tobe pen kyawaina kyawa tobe temati kyawati meeting chene kyawa tobe temati kyawa tobe temati chasu ne kyawati nyamsu ne ya timbuya ba sasa kyawati 아니 교화도 배치는 게 대부분 마샤르체 다고 뒤는데 제가 녀라 교화디 제 교화디 미게체 교화도 배치마치게 근데 교화디 랑도 근데 랑제라 냠술 랭구미야 그래서 냠술 해야지 랑도 니부티 아니 랑도 담불랑도 니부티 셰 차트네 데네 랑제티 냠수미야 담 돌제티 빠야비 아니 냠네 치우르 바스 누가서 아니 랑도라 주파티 세메치베게 부스제
세메치베게
다티쿠 세메디게 부문에 그서지리야 근데 담볼랑들기 네또 또 차스네 랑도 냠내 주불 봐 티티치디 다티
세메
세메마 치베게부터 가르치는데 랑도라 주파티샤
주체 세디 세마코라나 the cemetery to Gyumed that does quite. So this is very this is new to me and really fascinating. So it's talking about correct cognition, the role that it plays in spiritual practice. So that should make your ears pick up. So something that is an entity, an object, something that the mind can engage. There is something that we may or may not know it to be a virtue, but the virtue for an act, for instance, or a mental state even. But it's an object, it's an import. So that's something that has to be engaged by your mind. Your mind has to determine it as a virtue, right? So then when your awareness then kind of operates in such a way that it's able to have that object appear to your awareness in a way that you recognize it as being virtuous, right? Then then the quality, the essential quality of what it means to be a correct cognition is operating, and as a result of that, you develop what we would say is a correct cognition about what a virtue is, right? So once we've determined what the virtue is and understood it as a virtue, then we're able to, through our own knowledge, we're able to recognize, oh, this is something that I need to pursue. This is something that I need to take up. This is something that I need to adopt. So that is the phrase in here is that the point at which correct cognition gives you the capacity and the ability to apply yourself or engage in virtues as things to be adopted, and non-virtues, and by a similar analogous process, as something to be rejected, then in either of those instances, once that correct cognition has been developed and it exists in your mind, then that becomes the drupje. Drupje means the establishing agent. So that cognition becomes the establishing agent by which you recognize the so-called result, or the circumstance, the consequence of having created or developed the cognition, that you have the ability to engage in it. So tseme chöbe jebu means the result of what the correct cognition has established or determined is that you now have the ability, you have the awareness, the knowledge, the capacity to know virtue as virtue and as something that needs to be engaged, and so then that gives you the opportunity or the skill by which you can in fact follow through and carry out that kind of activity, spiritual activity. So the correct cognition itself is the same word as the drupje sometimes means like the proving agent. So the correct cognition is sort of what enables you to prove, to gain the result of proving that object as the thing which you need to engage, or that other object as the thing which you need to reject. And so that's mental. That's something that's mental in nature, and that's why the mind is the principal quality for what we want to identify as correct cognition. That seems to be what's being talked about here. So to me, that's wonderful. There you know, you talk about Zema, Paramahansa, job no big rich, all right,
Shevachiri Nigeres, Jebri. Since Tambutana, Sinani, Kaya Teme Pungo, Tambutana, that Samajuli the Kasa in the Tats, Semenami Shevi Kebri. That's Samajul Martin the Kasa Yamarba, when don't read you the Chamayari. Nombuto the Chamayarba. Nombuseto the Chamayarba. Well, it's Yarity. Could Chamata Semi Nami Shimarba. That could Chamati Chamata Semi Nami, the Chamakoran Shigaresena, and the Chamakoran Julie the Kasayina, the Chamata Semi Nami Mamoba, Chepuri, Chamata Semi, the Chamari, the Chamamaris, Janami Chetu Gruba.
Not Marikina.
Ah,
Nor Mare.
oh, no, the Chamamaris, Nami Chetu Gruba, Kota Chamata Semi Nami Shesuna. That is the Yamar, don't regular Chamayarba. Chamayarity, Chamata Semi Nami Shigmarba. Well, just Chema Sabumilori, but the Chamara need to top a race, and that Kaya Semenami Mamumbe Chapter is Jeff. Not it. And Rane Chijungi Chamashenda, Goris and the Chamati Yach, Chamashenda, Chamashenda, Chambat.
Okay, so then the next point is the heading for it is Senshi. Senshi means the pramana itself, right? The thing being defined, or the thing being Sema means illustrate, right? Being explained, right? The object to be explained is what is a tsema, and the thing that explains it is the phrase that is the defining, that puts into words what the defining quality of that is. So then, the thing which is a tsema, right? The thing that we want to say is a correct cognition, is itself validating. Is the ability to determine that our correct cognition possesses the defining quality, which is that it's the original or the new non-deceiving awareness of its object. How is that determined? Is it determined by that correct cognition itself? Does it validate itself, or is it something else necessary, separate from it, that you have to rely on to look back at it, in fact, and say, oh yes, okay, now I can say that's a correct cognition, which is the case. So this is kind of the next point, is which of those applies, or perhaps both, but at any rate, this is what we're talking about. So then it says, if it's an all or nothing matter, if it's to say that all correct cognitions are self-validating, then what follows from that is there would never be any need for one to distinguish between what is a pramana and what isn't a pramana, because it would be evident, it would be self-evident to everyone, not only humans, but even, for instance, animals. An animal in its own, sense perception will perceive an object, and if its faculties as an animal faculty is unimpaired, then the object that it perceives is a correct cognition for that animal. But does that animal have the capacity to know that, in fact, that's a correct cognition? We would like to say not, right? It's an animal, right? So then that would seem to imply that in order to determine the correct cognition to be something that for which that defining attribute applies, in order to determine that, we have to we have to use something else to make that determination. Okay. So that's the second alternative. If that's true, then that thing which allows you to determine, say, that the sense cognition is a valid sense cognition, and that's the basis for it, then how do you know that that thing that's validating it is itself correct? Well, then you'd have to be something else that validated that, and so on, and you have an infinite regress. So both of those alternatives seem to be untenable. Right. So the question is, how do we resolve that point?
That is.
Yes.
That is a rally by sharing. That is Chamaku, money rally never sharing it. Chabayamaris. Ranking it, ranking every Chabayamari. Ranking Mangibe Chabayamaris. That ranking never sharing every Chabayamaris. Rally Chijumi, some shady good yari. Rally Chiju, some shady good Magiba, yet to meet yaris. Rally. Chamakus, any rally never sharing every Chabamaiti, rally never use, sharing never yaris. The rally never Taisha was Yamsu, Rally Musungi, Musum Samale, Rangu Tobana, did that did Jejibe, Meluya, that Ranyam Musum Semades, Rangu Moto, but the Shevati Moto, but Tina. Any Shevati that did Milu, you be chatting and Doveries, Ranning a Batikiri.
Running Musum
Running Musum in the Denny, Shevaran. Milua to Nichiaris, Milua, you bet Charan took the bottom of 27. Semakaji Rangi, Sheja, Dobe, Dule, Chi, you may tiny bit Samade, Milua Samanitu, Dog or 20. That year is Samadilla, and Rahanyam Simu Rangi, Sheji. You talk about these and Lari Musundi to Nichiaris. Samakaji Rang Dusu, Samatil never came into the Rale Chiju with Samashinda Jitene, and never came to Nichiaris. That is his man. Chamaku Sidua.
Right.
Chamaku.
The Rale ranking more toxin the Tawana is one. So in the root text, let's read the commentary says, and then you can identify what part of the root text is talking about. So the question has been set, and so then the commentary, the author of the commentary has written it in such a way to answer that seeming, what do we call that? Dilemma, right? So he says, as a matter of fact, it's not the case that all correct cognitions are self-validating, nor is it the case that all correct cognitions are validated by something other than themselves. That's the answer to that dilemma. And he says, okay, and what's an example of the former? And what's an example of the latter? So there are cases where the cognition is the correct cognition is self-validating, and there are other cases where the correct cognition is validated by something subsequent. So in the first case, in the first instance, self-validating, then in the root text, now get the root text, it says, it is realized by itself of its own nature. rangle rangi ngotok. So that correct cognition realizes itself by itself, right? Realizes its own nature by itself. So that line, it realizes itself by itself, is explained as saying that element of this Yogacara school theory, which says that there is a self-awareness, there is an element of our consciousness, which is kind of the, what would you say, sort of the witness of everything that goes on in the mind. So there's kind of like another aspect of the mind that perceives everything that our main mind then cognizes. And that kind of second quality of the mind is that self-awareness, rangrik in Tibetan. So that rangrik is a kind of direct perception, right? Direct rangrik munsum. So that rangrik munsum sema, that direct perception of, say, so when we have perception of the blue color, as I said, there is a form of the mind which perceives the mind perceiving the blue color. So that element of the direct perception, that is self-awareness, that is the mind realizing its own nature as being correct, right? So that's a case of self-validating correct cognition. Okay, so because that form of self-awareness is undeceiving, unerring in the way that it cognizes the sensory part of the direct perception. And it is able to do that on its own, right? It's not relying on anything else. Rantoki Nyemba Jampa. So he says, Tonature means we can observe that. And that seems to be saying that when we perceive things, then we are able to recognize that we perceived something. Let's talk about recollection. Well, how do we know that? We know that because there had to have been that self-awareness element of the sensory perception, which allows us to be able to remember that we perceived it. And that sort of tag-along self-awareness part of our perception is the self-validating part of correct cognition, in the case of sensory perception. And then he says there are other cases, other kinds of correct cognition, certain other correct cognition, semakachi. Then when they perceive their object, the object that they determine correctly, rangishecha tokdu, when that correct cognition occurs at a certain moment, in a certain set of circumstances, but it's not validated, it's not recognized to have been a correct cognition until some later chinjungi tanyebe tsema. So tanyebe tsema, tanye means, it's really the word for conventional awareness. Conventional awareness means our ordinary, kind of like our ordinary experience. Through our ordinary experience, then we can determine that what we perceived was correct. And that subsequent experience enables us to verify that the former cognition was in fact a correct cognition. So that's and that subsequent conventional awareness is unerring with regard to, or is able to determine that that original cognition was unerring with regard to its object, whereas that original cognition itself was not self-determining as unerring. So our experience tells us it was unerring.
Tuba Chama did the days, it is Tuba Sanga Jumde, Sadu Mulu, but it didn't then by the issue. That she said Tamja, Sadu Mulu, but it at Dembarba, Tamji Timbarba, Ati chamatidante mayasa. Jasa tuang chamatidante sati dire jasa da salu miluas. Jasa marisa karasa chamat chiyo chamat juba sati. Chamat juba sati chamat chumba isiye. Chamat chumba sati sanje chumde de tabaran ju chemikiu maris ju tabsingi kumbala teni jo tuma tabsingi kumbala teni ni chemikiu chubari sidu jamatati ni tabaran ju bi chemikiu batika ta tabaran ju chemikiu te karesna tati shida ina ta Jampa ishiwo sinya. Ani Jampa sinya. Unju siatu su. Nanjumi. Chemeki buri dugi yarwa. Ani taba yinsi yarwa. Tati ji gyawa mambu jigi ani tabshigi topa kumbala teni 중앙 예수님이 있으게 말봐. 담고네 두두를 치와 사실이. 시기야 봐. 만족이 되가래서는 담고네 상게 두두를 치야 말이스. 아니 지 겨와도 막 탑시 공부라. 탑도 싫었다. 육수수수가 탑시 미 공부를 때는 다를 완제 탐제방 시제 같은지 방도미인데 탐지는 수도 같이 아니 진짜 지켜야 되는 거 봐. 그래서 정말 규바시야 되기 고주티 가르레스는 따바른 주기 재밌게 미인 거니까 아니 동가 상계지 교황하고 아니 탑식을 똑같아 공부하더니 니 반도인데 요수도 같이 대시게 어디 상계 참만 교바스 때디 아니 그데스 제는 돌아 펜시 동바스 딩이 이부티 중수순서바 니들이 딩이 저도마 공부할 때는 대부분 수수도가 니디 대시에다 겹팅이래 방바디시스 도바디시스 니제 겹세주다 수부디리 두디 방바디시도 도바디시스디 방도비 대티셔라 아니 겹세주다가 수부디 수 초부디 시기에 랑기 저지다가 신도 실바디 시베코니 주제는 나랑 가와다 준다 아니 그에 동일이 껴버 제바티 다디 저디 초부 주제 강글로 수수기로 다 제바티 어리와 초주부들와 어디 산다든지 문주디 세마기바세다디 어다다지 세마기 되게 티셔서 다때는 마침에 되면 뭐도가 다디게 제일 샹지
So these are indicative of the Buddhist epistemological schools understanding and explanation of what constitutes correct cognition. And so in these opening verses of the second chapter are meant in the general sense of what constitutes correct cognition. So that main attribute was that thing which is original or new in its unerring, non-deceptive perception of its object. And we talked about the action that doesn't just refer to the essence, but also refers to the action of object. And there are all these various kind of related points that, all taken together, are the kind of filling out what that phrase, sardu milua, which means to be non-deceptive, newly non-deceptive, that essential phrase, what that really means. Once that has been presented, and there are still a few more verses and a few more points that we haven't yet talked about. Once that full presentation of the overall meaning of correct cognition as a form of mind has been put forth, then the verses, I think it's the seventh verse, the opening part of the seventh verse says, the Bhagavan, right? The Bhagavan, Gyumed means the Buddha Shakyamuni, is the one who possesses that pramana, means that form of correctly recognizing or cognizing the nature of then all the relevant objects for achieving all the spiritual goals, and for what the goals are and what are the ways of achieving those goals. And so it's saying the Buddha possesses those qualities. So he is the Tsemekibu, means he is the being who possesses in the highest sense the quality of being an unerring cognition of things. However, the attribute is not simply that the Buddha is the unerring cognition or possesses the unerring cognition, but rather he's someone who achieved that status. For Buddha means he became that. He achieved that through a process of cultivating the path over countless lifetimes, practicing the two main causes of compassion and wisdom. And so the meaning or the import or the significance of saying the one who became such an authority in the sense of being correct cognition is to contrast the nature of the Buddha with the notion of omniscience and omniscient creators that are kind of the beliefs, part of belief systems of non-Buddhist Brahmanical traditions or whatever phrase you want to use, the traditions that call Brahma the creator of the world, or Ishvara, and the notions of that sort of divine creator is Takpa Rangjung. In Tibetan, the word Takpa and Rangjung. So Takpa means literally means permanent. Nitya means, but in Buddhism means it is that permanence. From the Buddhist perspective, what's wrong with it is that it means unchanging and permanent in that sense. So just anyway, that will come. I don't know. I'm going to take probably everybody will talk about that. And then Rangjung means Swayambhu, right? Swayambhu means something that's self-originated and has always existed. So the primordially existent, uncaused, eternal being that is omniscient and in most instances also is considered to be the divine creator. Well, when we think of Buddha as the ultimate authority and source of spiritual knowledge, we don't think of him in that way at all. We think of him as someone who previously was not such an authority, but became such an authority, Pramanavarttika. And he became that through cultivating the main principal causes for that, to attain that status. And once he attained that status, right, the status in the initial presentation is Sugata and Savior, Gyumed. And so between those two, Sugata is generally means the aspect of enlightenment which is called Rangden Punso, the perfection of one's own aims. And that has the two, this is somewhat revisiting what we talked about before, but it ties in with where we reached and where we're going to go forward. So the Sugata has the two interpretations of being the attainment of the state of ultimate well-being, which is literally what Sugata means, in which all the obstacles have been abandoned, obstacles to knowledge, and then all the realizations have been fully attained, attained highest realization. So those two elements are part of the Buddha's then Dharmakaya, if you like. And then the quality of being a savior are the elements of the Buddha that refer to his physical aspect. And his physical aspect is the means by which the Buddha communicates what he saw himself and attained himself, and then conveyed to others in whatever way was most suitable to his audience at the time. And so that physical aspect is mainly identified or associated with the supreme Nirmanakaya form of the Buddha, which is, for example, Buddha Shakyamuni. And so both of those elements are then are the qualities by which we recognize the Buddha as someone who became the ultimate spiritual authority. And so Rinpoche says that maybe for this teaching, those points that have been given today should serve as kind of the foundation for the general explanation of what pramana means. And now we'll go forward with the discussion about how they apply to and what it means in relation to the Buddha.
Tena Juba said that Rola Pen said that Rola Pen said some of you to study Tanam Sejiti, some of you to Musma, Della Joapin Tele, Joapin to Gitu, Dinile, the Hupin to Julo Seshtuga.
Jason, sorry.
Teaching Jada Jaji, get the Jabina.
Oh, no, so Jaji. Page 81, if you're using the same edition of the book that Rinpoche is looking at, which is someone showed me, I think we'll have it. Shushi Drubatan, Delit Sama Drubatan, right? Niba Direct. Niba Chabaki Shushi Druba Some of the most one, Delajo, so
Some of the today.
do.
That Samba Pindo Musumatan, Dele, Joa Pindo, Gitus, Dinile, Debu Pindo, Pusubani Yarva, Robata Dishini, or Tuzilos, Jetta, Tambula, Samba Pindo, Tambi, Puru Debat, Madruba,
So we're going now past all the Pramanavarttika discussions, which deals with divine, the refutation of a divine creator, and going to the four attributes. And
Which verse number?
so that's what I'm looking for. Tawananchana, the
Tati Tawati Chena, Namdi Tawati Chena.
Druje Tuje Jekomble direct. Okay, so the first of the four attributes is the most excellent or the perfect attitudes of one of the main causes, the main motivation for seeking enlightenment is compassion. And so that is verse 34, I believe, in the root text. Yeah, it's wow.
Tati Dua Tuji Gomba Le Shivane Teacher in Shiva Parsiduga Tati Tuji Gomba Le Dine Karito Tawati.
Tuje Gomle de lo ni luna tembeche.
Tati
Gobetu
Tati Jobate Tati Gonda Titerito Tuji Gomba Le se Seme Kibu Tuji Tambu Tuji Satire. Seme Kibu Tuji Tambu Tuji de Karesena Ni Samba Tiri Tuji Chibut Gomba. Tuji Chimbuka Tumba Gombas Ani Satire. Tuji Chimbu Di Seme Kibu Tuji Tugar Chebala Tambur Mundo Sun Kwedi Tambur Tada Tunele Goya Debe Niji Kene Di Jesu Tuneshive Tak Gombara Chebala Tambara Gurush Gwebe Tambari Yukobe Chebala Tuji Chebu Di Cheji Gyumed Mitumbe Gure Rangi Rinda Nama Gombari Tuji Chebala Da Tamba Seme Kibu Tuji Ripa Tambu Tikaresena Tuji Chimbu Terwa Sam and Kundi Chuchu Jena Tamari Tuba Dola Pen Shiva Terwa Dola Taji to Temple Shiva Tiba. That is the Tawana Jena Tuji Kumbale Silva.
So this verse 36, it starts out by saying the proof. Sadhanam or drupje means the logical proof for the assertion or the claim that the Buddha Bhagavan is the one who became his ultimate spiritual authority. That's the thesis. And then the first proof is, so it says, the proof, right? In the verse it starts off saying proof of that claim is Tukje Gomle. It is, the first reason is because he cultivated compassion. So that's the first reason. And because he cultivated compassion, is a reference to the first of those four attributes, saying that the Buddha is the one who was desirous of benefiting the world. So that attribute of being the one who was desirous of benefiting the world is interpreted as a reference to great compassion, not just compassion, but tukje chimbo, great compassion in the Mahayana sense of compassion. And that's the first proof or the first reason to establish that the Buddha is or became an ultimate spiritual authority.
That is that's Sanje Jumde the any Tuji Chimbujo Tumar Kumbale Tumbare Sjerva. Down the Tuji Chimbutia Kadesi Kimili Maris Rangi Namata Techida Randula Jampa Tateva Simiti Yarva Jampa Tateva Simiti Narandu Kangolo Yechirva Inea Churi Chori Chirva. That Digi Gyumed Gumne, Nitine Tachelu Chirutani, Niji Chimbusimiti, Uyarva.
No.
Just under Karesuri. Joa to Makunda, Neti, Zakaresuri. Gyumed and Mitube, Tuji Chamber teacher, Gyumed and Mitube, Julian Minjungi, Rangi Nama, Gombale Chuicher, Tuji Chamber teacher, Tiba Chibe, Lampunde, Tome, Tuji, Imbatan, Jobata, Jobata, Jerry Jenny, Tikubalaya, Tomar, Tuji, dear Tumarode, you think you ought to be. That day. That year, that when Tuji Chambers in a Karesina, that Tuji Chambers at the knowledge and Tuji Chambers at the Sangi Mission Magic, Tuji Chimbu the Keju Gesha,
Journal.
Journala, Tuji Chimbu the Keju Gay. Dina he Jenny that Tuji Chimbu the Sanjay Nancy, Sinjay Nancy, Yari. That Niji Chimbu the Tuji Chimbu Kagachi Kaga Jingi. That and they didn't general Tuji Chimbu the Niji Chimbu Kaga Meres. Or Tuji Kumde, Samba Pinto Sambas said the Niji Chimbu the Chevara. Oh, that thing young Niji Chimbu Chevara. Jessa Niji Chimbu the Tuji Chimbu Kaga Meres.
So, to take up now this topic of compassion, so just to read the phrases in the text, it says, this is, well, if you have the Tibetan, I don't think anybody has the edition, so much point to tell you what it is, but if you found the place, then it says, in order to show how great compassion is a valid means of proving that the Buddha is a being who is a true spiritual authority, we have to recognize that it is something that must precede his attainment of that status. So if it's in this sense, the proof of it, the cause of it is that it is. The proof of it is that that compassion serves as a cause for becoming enlightened. And it says initially, tada dumele droe dova ninjeke ne dejes duneshu tap. So it says, how is it a precondition for becoming an enlightened being, a supreme enlightened being? It says, because in order to become enlightened, he's saying, and rather than to achieve liberation, you have to initially develop the great compassion that wants to liberate all sentient beings. Tada means all beings. And after you've generated that compassion, that great compassion, then you cultivate the knowledge that is the means to put an end to suffering. Even for a Buddha, to become a Buddha. So Buddha puts in attaining his enlightenment, he's also ending his own suffering as well as then following that, ending the suffering of others. So first he has to become a Buddha, as he terminates the suffering, first he has to develop compassion in order that that path will be one that will lead to Buddhahood rather than some lesser goal. So that is how he will become ultimately the teacher, right? Then the teacher in the sense of the one who, it has two meanings, right? It has the meaning of the wisdom, which is the cause that enabled him to become the teacher who teaches others. So that's the second of those two causes. And then, then just to interject, Rinpoche said then, when we talk about, we're saying here that that first cause, this initial cause for becoming the supreme authority, spiritual authority, is great compassion. So when we say great compassion, Mahakaruna, then Tibetans have, in Tibetan, you can distinguish terms by an honorific. So, for instance, you will say to Buddha, you will say Gu Sum Tuk. For an ordinary person, you say Lu Na Yi or something like that. The same way, compassion, if you want to distinguish it somewhat, you can say Tuk Je Chenpo. As Tuk Je Chenpo is a more kind of reverential way of saying great compassion, or you could say a more common way, Ming Je Chenpo. So the reason for distinguishing those terms in Tibetan is, in the case of the Abhidharmakosha, the Abhidharmakosha says that a great compassion is only a term that's only used to refer to a Buddha. Only a Buddha has great compassion. So it means that in the Hinayana sense, great compassion has that exclusive and distinct meaning, quite different from Mahayana. And so Rinpoche said in the Abhidharmakosha, it describes that Buddha's great compassion as having 8 unique attributes to it. But in any case, the main point is only the word great compassion only applies to a Buddha. Then we have other Buddhist traditions. Typically, Mahayana position is that it's not exclusive to a Buddha. So we can say that there are sentient beings, non-enlightened beings, who have great compassion. And so then, in this case, this text represents that point of view, which says that great compassion is a necessary cause that precedes the attainment of enlightenment. So this is just making a clarification about different schools of views about the nature of compassion. And then the text goes on to say, that great compassion that we're talking about here, Gyumed mijung. So this is a well-known phrase which says that things arise, that causally produce things, of which great compassion is one. It's a mental entity, it's an impermanent entity, is something that is not produced without a cause. It doesn't just arise spontaneously. So not gyumeva means it's not something that is uncaused, nor is it something that arises from an inappropriate cause. Mitubegyu means something that is the anger is not a cause for compassion, for instance. That would not be a suitable cause for compassion. So compassion arises from something other than unsuitable causes, or something that is, it is not something that is without a cause. So then it says, why? Because compassion, and this is kind of the basic point that's being made about the nature of great compassion is, great compassion, the great compassion that bodhisattvas have, is derived from cultivating those mental states which are of a similar class of mind as great compassion itself. Rangi Rikja Nama. Rang is here, its own is referring to great compassion. Great compassion is, in this case, a result in something that you achieve. Then it becomes the cause for seeking Buddhahood. But to achieve great compassion itself, it comes from a continuum of causes that are a similar type of mind. So what that means is we all have the capacity to develop some form of loving kindness and compassion. So in certain circumstances, we all will develop a sense of empathy or concern for others. The problem is that that for most of us, that compassion is limited, or it is only directed toward certain types of beings and not towards others. So we have to refine it. And if we do refine it, then eventually that class of mind that represents this kind of the most fundamental elements of compassion can ultimately then become true great compassion. So saying that's the only way to gain great compassion. Doesn't just pop into being, and you can't engage in activities that are antithetical to it.
다음에 다투지 전부디 랑게린데가마 공부라티네 수고가 랑게린데가마 나란도 강걸을 잠바도 저어야지야리 티야게 야다니 아니 자체로 제부다니 드네 심제 탐제를 미베 아니 저와 지키기야리 내가 네 니지 친구스야리 내가 이간데스 지그레스는 동해제 이심제 장이 바마숨 간 간데지네 아니 가는 미장 아니 동해제 대대로 랑기 낭기 개베 지중스나 네 제가 니지 친구스기야 말한도 동해제 이심제 장이 바숨 야르바
그렇죠.
나라도 지나 라는 네가 진행이 동해지 심제의 통일들이 아니 저와지 랑게 난기 깨야지 양말바
그렇죠.
디지도 우리 니지 전부 깨야 말해 그래서 장이 라는 네가 진행이다 야 발마를 라는 대화단 네베 땅은 제지 되게 지내다 근데 지레 동해지 되게 발마스 동해쟁기 아니 차르지 최순이 랑기 랑기 동해대 된들로 지기고도는 아니 민지 정도식이 듣기게 하래 되면은 민지 정도기게 한 말이야 어디래
So then we all have the kind of the basic ability to develop some form of loving kindness, caring for others, and wanting others to be happy, and wanting to free others of suffering when we see. But in order to gain great compassion, we have to refine that capacity that we have, that sort of natural ability that we have to develop those mental qualities, emotional qualities. Then, so the kind of the essential point that needs to be understood, and how that quality of wanting to benefit others, what form it has to take is, so it says, Gyumed jengi semchen. So it starts out with Gyumed jengi semchen, means no matter what sentient being we may perceive, kind of like mik means whoever we happen to turn our attention to. Then Gyumed, in order to identify them as Gyumed, it means we have to understand what it means to be a suffering being. Not in the ordinary sense of suffering, but really in the sense of a samsaric suffering. So we have to have a refined sense of what it means to be suffering as well. Then, so but the point is to start from there. We look at our sentient being, and we know that that sentient being is like, as we are a suffering sentient being, they also are a suffering sentient being. And then no matter what sentient being we may encounter, then it adds the description adds the three qualities of Janyin, Dharma, Sum. Right? So it's kind of three basic categories of others that there can be are other that's an enemy, an other that is a friend or a relation, and an other that is neither, by which it means a stranger or someone that you have no feelings one way or the other, positively or negatively. So then it's saying, no matter what kind of person that might be, of those three types, then rangi ngangi means spontaneously, naturally, effortlessly. As soon as you see that being, then you will generate the desire to free them from the suffering, the deep sense of suffering that you know them to be subject to. So that's the kind of compassion that you have to have in order to say that you have great compassion.
That is that sanity to the chingu setri, that chambo. Dina the samba pindu setri, Jampa yari, Ninji yari, and Dina the Chanju sings to Suyari.
No, so.
That is that's the rich dash.
So, with that basic explanation of what we mean when we say great compassion, then tomorrow we'll start talking about elements of that great compassion. So it includes the qualities of loving kindness. It includes also bodhicitta, as well as, of course, what compassion itself means. And then we'll discuss that presumably as it is addressed generally, and as well as it's addressed in the root text. So we'll take that up starting tomorrow morning. So with the remaining time, some questions. A question, some questions.
I had a question about in the definition of the correct cognition, there's a the non-deceptiveness.
Oh yeah. Okay.
And the non-deceptiveness related to the action of the thing that you're perceiving, the entity that you're perceiving. So with fire, you use the example that non-deceptively, I guess, perceiving fire would be that you're perceiving that it can burn and incinerate something.
Yeah.
So is that to say that if you perceive it in its forms of colors, like it's got orange and red, is that technically incorrect cognition? And let's say that you look at something like the cloth covering a table, and you see, that it has qualities of color and it's almost like an art form. You don't necessarily perceive the action of it or even recognize the relevance of it. So I guess what I'm saying is, and then who determines what that particular definition of the non-deceptive action is? And then does that undermine the notion of things not having fixed qualities, I guess?
Does that, if it's arbitrary or if it's flexible, does that?
Well, not that it, but if we accept that there's a non-deceptive way of looking at an object, like fire incinerates, then does that undermine the notion that things don't have fixed qualities?
The things don't have fixed qualities.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what you mean by, that's a loaded phrase.
Okay.
What do you mean things don't have
Well,
fixed
that
qualities?
things are empty.
Okay, so he wants to introduce that. Okay, well, that's why I would say. Cheme kola ane chodi ane karsa milua Milua Chik, Patsiki Nuva sort of Chik, Kotsini now that Getchish Chik Jack. Then a D young, surely I am, Milua saying the conditional going on a senator, you be more Kangamare, Krangi Le, Kranki might be let and Dungeon Nube, lady, and I made the touching separate, Ramshi Yumbadi, Krayam Milua and Chik. Gokuga, Danda Kochamati, Dandati, continue the Desolchi, soon you are it. The day, Nepena made the touching sacrifice, the Krangi, Dakasa, Me Koran Rangi, Nuvas and the Krangi last and Jealousy, the Yena, and it made Dilia, other than not to do Dilla, and it made Pariana. Which Pariana, and to make the Tadugan, and make Koran, the major dig Koran Yard, soup yare, dra, Kasa, Yip yare, Kato yare, no, give the Kato dida, Sepe, Ranshi de Marwa, Chetan, and the Toluan, and the Kasa, Meg Kato, and Meg Mejeki, Yip the Toki, Tadugan, that the Toki may Yimbagi, Sama. Mahima took it rest.
Mahima de Tumarite, Co, Yeta, Kato to Suletani made to be a Mari. Messia did so city Chavachini, Newman is a tower. Could Chavati did Lurba. They didn't make the Nelly Yibi, Kari, Chiari to Su. Co may make us at the Tosiki Chavachini in the tower.
That the current Chachik. And then the compare but the Choktek on Joseph and has a red that the Choktek on the Omari and the Karini. Dianco, that Sema, the Casa Joseph topic Sema, Mayimba Sorsi, that Chipa Sorsi rock. Then Karsa, and Lady Kran Medi. Dojin Nube, Ranshi Yova Sorsi, Krangi, Taka Jake, Jelesorti Yova D. Dakarsa, Sema Digi, Toguyana, Ko Sema Yumadi, Ko Di Ledi Toguyana, Ane Arsa, thank you well, Nania, and Shirt the Super Ranshiki Midruba, Ranshiki Madruba, Krangi, Ranshiki Druba more, Sashin Seven more, the Jackson Yamares. Did I thought Kalamares, Kagatumares?
Such sympathy, reality, and she do Syria. Such sympathy, thank you very Yari, such sympathy Yari. Joseph Chavachi, Yari, Joseph Chavachi, Ranshiki Pune Chiama.
So, answer looks pretty easy. So he said, the fire, when you're looking at a fire, you see the color and the shape. That's not, that doesn't represent the essential nature of the fire, and you're not perceiving the fire's quality of burning and incinerating. But that is not to say that perceiving the colors are a deceptive awareness or a false kind of awareness. It's even though it's related to fire, but it's the color and the shape of the fire are not the fire. So that was one response. And I think your example of the cloth on the table was kind of similar to that. But he said, so as far as the not having fixed qualities, as you put it, he said that the Prasanghikas don't deny that fire has the quality of heating or having the ability to alter the nature of a thing as fire can do, or incinerate it in its extreme form. They just don't believe that is its self-existent quality. It's not a quality that exists independently in the object, independently of the mind that perceives it. So it's not a self-existent quality, but it conventionally, I think, is, we didn't use that word, but I think obviously that's the meaning, is that conventionally fire does have that attribute. So.
Yeah.
So slightly related to that,
Rinpoche said when we got the definition of valid cognition, Sadhu Mularikpa, Rinpoche said that the Prasangikas do not accept the Sardu part. Since Gyaltsap is giving us this definition, should we assume that Gyaltsap is giving us a Svatantrika commentary on Dharmakirti? And if who would be giving the Prasangika commentary that omits the Sardu part of the definition?
Okay, I understand. I think that's something that comes up, and the Tibetans are quite familiar with that idea. So, karasa di ane sama namde nanga seme tsenji di lo sardu milo was subiare. Ane di sardu ingubiare. Statisce di karasa tsema mahimba ke trans tutares. Jata ane geza jigi da kana di dewa zongken re ane di dewa di subiare ane di dewa di subikan korana ni ralu chi tingi yoga sori chi koshisha sori chi ga jata da sama namre ge dewa di taun seche ge ralu geza jigi ralu di ane umaram gyuwa de chasha ge re sketch chi ga
다 단대디 제나 선담배로 시샤진
이 가리네 좀 가리네 그런 정맥이
그래 그래도들이
라누티 거라
라누 말이
이네
그 룩디 시샤진을 누구야 그냥 아빠 도움이 선담배 따왔을 때는 퍼버려
맞아
아빠 도움이 엄마가리
맞아 그래서 선담배 것 중에 선담배 시작되는 순간이 미시죠. 그 프랑 엄마가 이네. 라누디 셰프이야 말이야. This is a very, what should I say, familiar sort of issue for Tibetans. So there's the notion of rangluk. Rangluk means what is your own view about something. And Shangluk would be something that is at odds with that and that you don't agree with, and so on. So, in the case of this commentary, this commentary to Pramanavarttika, you would say Shishak. Shishak means that he starts from the premise that he is explicating the Chittamatra position as it is represented in this text. That doesn't mean that's his final view by any means. And so that's one point. That was kind of the direct answer to your question. And what's added to this, that we say, for instance, and this is something that is certainly familiar to Tibetans as well. They will maintain, for instance, that Asanga. So we refer to Asanga as Arya Asanga, right? He's mentioned in the sutras as someone who achieved in different sutras certain levels of a Bodhisattva Arya. So if he achieved the level of Bodhisattva Arya, then that means he must have achieved direct realization of emptiness, all right? Because the Gelugpas view Tengdura school as the correct representation of reality, and so then regardless of what texts Asanga may have been involved in their composition, and regardless of what philosophical position, some of the 5 texts, the Gelugpas say that they're associated with different schools. Some of them are Chittamatra school, some of them are Madhyamika school, and some of them are Pasamika Madhyamika school. So that means that Asanga adopted that point of view for that text, but his own position would have been something different. So that's kind of it.
I think you misunderstood the question. I got that.
Right. Well, so this is not being written from the point of view of the Sattvic school.
Right. But my question was, Rinpoche said that the Prasangika presentation of cognition omits Sardu.
Right.
I was saying, who gives that presentation? Who has presented it?
The Prasangika view of correct cognition? I'm sorry. Then Tengyuwa ge tseme ge kor and in Tibetan, among Tibetans.
Or Indian.
That Karine Chik Karsa. Jagaraki Kawaii Nandra, Gabaki Kawaii Nandra, and Tigurwagi Seme Kor, Seme Namsha, Tigurwagi Ralu Yimadi, Senitandi, and Shung Yagadi, and the congested ones in Congress. Currently, Local Jag is Gandagi, Kawachi Sashagaris.
That is Tigurwagi Sementing Pranayari, Milua said, Sementing that they got it to read. Chema City Tambayan Chigi Chema City Tambachi Chene Tenju said Cherba. She don't think with the Chene Tenju, Chamber Cherry Tartu Batirida. Tell you that Tenju, the Cherry Tenju Tartu Batirida. The answer Frank Lulet Chemeting Yarity, Dotiba Crescent Combatant Dotiba with Chemeting Director Bugia Maris. Radang is Chemeting Yari.
Says that the Annie Petishana Uma Juba, right? 6 a. Oh, 6 is left up in another Mumbai or what?
Yeah,
Annie Chunju. So, commentaries to the Bodhicaya Avatar 9th chapter. 9th chapter discusses issues relating to the subject of pramana. Chandakirti's Madhyamika Avatara. There is in the 6th chapter, there's a specific section that addresses the nature of pramana as he understands it. Also in the Prasana Pada, in the 1st chapter, he explicitly rejects Dignaga's views on pramana. So the point, the direct answer that Gyumed gave was that you shouldn't think that Buddhist epistemology texts are limited to the so-called historical Indian epistemological school as represented by Dignaga, Dharmakirti, and his followers. That we can think of many other great scholars, and some of whom were Prasangikas, whether they were Indian or whether they were Tibetan, and that their writings address explicitly and directly the topic of what constitutes correct cognition, minus that extra point of being the original cognition of reality or the object. Does that do it? Okay.
Oh yeah. Chanju